Hey everybody, welcome. This is Becky, Liggero of CoinGeek.com, and this is the AI, Bitcoin, and blockchain panel. We're here today to talk about how these technologies are such a perfect fit for the casino industry, and in particular Latin America, because this is an emerging market and there are so many players that are still unbanked. And if it was up to me, I would say this is the absolute most exciting space in the gambling world right now. This is where the future is headed, where the innovation is happening. So let's have some fun today and learn all about this exciting topic. And with me here today, I have three fantastic panelists. They come from all corners of the blockchain space, so lots of experience here with us today. Thank you, boys, so much. And I'd like to start off by having each of you introduce yourselves briefly and explain how you were involved with the blockchain space. And so we will start off with Kurt.
Well, thank you, Becky. I appreciate it. I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr., currently Chief Bitcoin Historian with CoinGeek.com. However, I have a long history in the Bitcoin space. I got involved in 2012 when somebody paid me some Bitcoin to do a job, and well, that sent me down the rabbit hole. I've been involved in mining, software development, business development, consulting, all kinds of other things in the space. But I'm one of those people that's been a full-timer through multiple bull and bear cycles. I never leave the Bitcoin economy. I'm not one of those guys that just shows up when things are hot, because I just like it. So I'm here to help. I know lots and lots of people and lots of things and have lots of experience across the economy. So happy to be here and really grateful for everyone's time.
Outstanding, Kurt. And yes, you've helped me personally quite a bit in my journey here. So thank you for that. And also, Kurt has a really, really amazing live stream each week, every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Miami time. It's a great place for beginners. So tune in there and you can learn even more. Okay, thank you. And Alex.
Hey, this is Alex Agut. I am the CEO of Handcash, and we say that this is the Bitcoin wallet you can recommend. And we basically help businesses of all kinds, gaming companies like online gambling companies too, and all kinds of social media apps and stuff to monetize through nano payments. And we have a very, very easy to use SDK, which is very easy to plug into any existing app or create a new app from scratch. And it handles everything for you, so you don't have to be custodial. Every transaction is peer-to-peer, super reliable, instant, low fees. So we make it very easy for both users and developers to actually use Bitcoin.
That's right. I actually use Handcash every single day, and if I can do it, you can do it. And also for the audience here, just wanted everyone to know that Alex does speak Spanish. So anybody in the audience that would like to speak with Alex or his team in Spanish, they are welcome to do so. Thank you. And Joseph.
Sure.
Hi, Becky. Hi, everyone. Well, I have a long history in gaming, let's say. I've been over 15 years working in the gambling industry. I was also a regulator in Malta. I was Chief Regulatory Officer of the Gaming Authority here. And I was also on the board of the International Association of Gaming Regulators. But since 2017, early 2017, where possibly even late 2016, I started getting interested in blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And I decided to build a practice within the firm, specifically on blockchain and crypto. I was lucky that it was just before the big bull market, which brought more interest in that, and it also compelled the government here to actually come up with regulations for exchanges and other service providers within the crypto industry, and also the gaming regulator to come up with a sandbox specifically for gaming operators to be able to, on the one side, accept cryptocurrencies as payment, and on the other hand, also use blockchain technology within their platform.
Very good. And I think Malta is such an exciting jurisdiction because it's friendly to both the gambling industry and to the blockchain industry. So thank you, Joseph, for being with us. Thank all of you guys. And I think to kick things off, I wanted to just bring up a more general topic, which is within the gambling industry. We've been talking about Bitcoin and blockchain for quite a while. I would say blockchain was a really, really hot topic, probably around 2014, 2015. It was every conference we were talking about it. But then we kind of moved away from it for a bit. We kind of oh, it was a buzzword, we're going to move on. It didn't really take off. But now come 2021, and everyone's excited about blockchain again. And I think this goes beyond the gambling industry too. It's become a very, very hot area. So I wanted to know from all of your perspectives, why are we seeing this shift back into the mainstream with blockchain? And I'll start with you, Kurt.
There's so many things. There's so many broken promises. Looking back over the last 4 or 5 years now, and really since the beginning, I mean, Bitcoin, and when I got involved, was supposed to be this digital cash for the world, and it was supposed to make inefficient markets more efficient, and we were all going to benefit from having a global money that we can all use, and it's frictionless. And well, then that just kind of didn't happen. Instead, it was a lot of people arguing about small technical differences. It was a lot of computer scientists having conversations and arguments that normal people didn't understand. And then business people looked at and said, well, that's too unprofessional for me to get involved in. It's just going to waste my time. And 2017 was a big bull market cycle, and we saw a lot of gambling industry-related tokens built on Ethereum. And I think the problem with those is generally that they were very focused special-purpose tokens, so that they would only work in one small corner of things, but they weren't interoperable across other things, even though that's what Ethereum claimed it was supposed to be, as this world computer. And then the other problem is that Ethereum just plainly doesn't scale. And it wasn't obvious initially, but once you get a few 100,000 people trying to make transactions at the same time, fees go from under a penny to all of a sudden you're paying dollars per transaction, or now in 2021 we've seen hundreds of dollars per transaction in many cases, and that censors out a lot of practical uses in the gaming space. So there's been a lot of niche things built by people as sort of hobby projects that I think people hope will end up changing the world, and then when it comes time for prime time, they are disappointing. So I think the first thing that needs to be solved is always scale, because blockchain really does one thing. You are writing monetary data to a ledger. That's all any blockchain does. So the only real difference is how fast can it do it and for what fee. And I think this is one of the things as a BSV advocate, I look at as the real opportunity there, that can handle millions or hundreds of millions of people using the ledger at a time, and the fees they remain imperceptible. And so I just think it's taken a long time to catch on, because there really, frankly, weren't business people looking at it in a practical sense to implement things that make business better on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's just a lack of maturity generally, and it was new technology. So I think some of that's acceptable. And then, but we're getting to the point where we're, 12 years on from Bitcoin hitting the space. It's time to start really being professional and start to implement things that make people's lives better. And then from there, I think we just see an explosion of use.
Excellent. Wonderful recap, Kurt. Thank you so much. And Alex, do you have something to add to that?
Sure. Well, I fully agree with what Kurt just said, and I might add two other things. Is that the reasons why you want to use a blockchain technology for the gambling industries are the main two, I think, are for payments and for transparency. And if the cost of any of those actions is more expensive than the perceived value of actually using that technology is not going to be used. So if we're registering a simple entry in a ledger that says that these three players were betting on this number, and the outcome was the outcome that you gave me. I mean, if I made some money out of this, I can check on the blockchain. What's all the logic behind why I got that money and who were the participants, or even if it's private or whatever, but you add those layers of transparency that you're not being cheated. And I think that's a great thing for a gaming platform. And the other is payments. But if I'm betting, $5, $2, whatever for in a poker game, I don't want to pay. It's absurd to think that I'm willing to pay $10 extra for just moving the coins here to there. So if those things don't make sense at an atomic level, those things, blockchain is not going to catch on this sector. But I think thanks to BSV, right now we are seeing things like peer game. Peer game is absolutely exploding with transactions. Every week they have a lot more transactions than the previous week, and you can check all the data on the blockchain that you have fair gaming, and all rewards are instant, and you can keep playing and keep playing and keep playing, and you don't suffer from any issues coming from the network at any point with BSV, and that's something that you cannot say from any other blockchain technology at this point.
Yeah, very good. So, I mean, to summarize, I bet 5 years ago, BSV didn't actually exist in the form it does right now. So this whole idea of micropayments and scaling, you weren't able to do that in 2014, and we can now. But Joseph, from somebody that actually comes from the gambling industry, and this is your focus all the time, can you speak to us about why you think blockchain and Bitcoin and digital currency is really bubbling back up to the top when it comes to our topic of conversations?
Well, definitely. There are a number of advantages that come along with the use of blockchain in particular, but also of cryptocurrencies in the gaming industry. So, first and foremost, through smart contracts and the use of cryptocurrencies, obviously there is the potential, let's call it that way, even because of what Kurt said, unfortunately, that there wasn't enough thought and maybe, how can I put it, enough planning done by many gaming operators to make use of cryptocurrencies in an efficient way and creating cryptocurrencies that are truly efficient for the purpose that are needed. But there is the potential of having massive advantages in terms of payments, because obviously today we depend definitely completely on third parties to move money from the person to the gaming operator, while with cryptocurrencies there will be a direct transfer between the player and the operator. So that in itself is a massive advantage, and it brings with it, it's impossible to list all the good things that brings to the experience of the user and to the operator as well. Keeping in mind, for example, it's the end of chargebacks, so we can forget chargebacks with cryptocurrencies. But that's just one of the many advantages. On the other hand, blockchain technology is even more exciting, I would say, than the use of cryptocurrencies within gaming, because one thing that, having been in the gaming industry, I've noticed, especially when I was a regulator, is that many operators and many players are actually not trusting operators. So even though they have certificates of games published by the biggest labs in the world, they have licenses from the best regulators in the world, it is human nature probably that the customer never trusts the operator from whom he or she are obtaining their services from. And I'd say that with blockchain technology, this could be completely resolved, because blockchain technology offers one thing that nothing else can offer in the same way, and that is definitely transparency. Apart from transparency in the audit trail as well. So you have, if you have games that are saying that they will be paying 95% of the total turnover, then obviously they are auditable. Anyone can actually check that game has actually paid out 95%. While right now, customers have to rely on testing labs and regulators that percentage is being adhered to. And having been a regulator, and I've seen the complaints of players, yes, most of the complaints of players are about this. And a good 99.9% of those complaints are simply conspiracy theories and definitely not correct. And operators are doing a good job about it. But that 0.1%, which may be true, unfortunately, instills a lot of fear and uncertainty in players, and that 0.1% is used by players to actually create conspiracy theories about the rest of the 99.9%. So with blockchain, we would be definitely getting rid of that problem.
Very good, Joseph. And I do like your point that I think the area that is so exciting about Bitcoin and blockchain with gaming is actually on the blockchain side and how you can be fully transparent. I know this is a big piece of what I'm working on myself, in fact, and talking also to affiliate programs and things like this on how to track
Obviously,
things.
if I may add, you can't really use the full potential of blockchain unless you use cryptocurrencies. So let's be clear about that as well. So, because I hear many people say blockchain is good, cryptocurrencies are bad. I'm sorry, but that doesn't make sense. You can't use the full potential of blockchain and benefit from it unless you use also cryptocurrencies.
Very good, thank you. And I just wanted to bring it back to payments for a minute, because we were talking earlier about high fees. So I just wanted to make sure we clear up confusion with the audience here, because I think a lot of people used different terminology to mean different things, and it can be very confusing. So for example, I know when we say the word Bitcoin, that means different things to different people. And BTC, Bitcoin, BTC, the fees there are very, very high. So BSV, also referred to as Bitcoin, the fees are very, very low. So what I wanted for you to do, Kurt, without getting too technical, because we're not, on your level here, to explain why the fees are able to be low on BSV and why they're so high on BTC and also Ethereum.
So it's basic supply and demand, but it's on the network level. So imagine BTC is a one-lane highway between two very populated cities that want to send stuff back and forth to one another. Well, there's going to be constant traffic jams. People want to use that highway that is BTC in order to transact value between each other, and it just plainly doesn't have the bandwidth. BSV, for example, would be the 25-lane highway or whatever you want to call it between those same two cities. But not only is the pavement wider, but it's also better. There's no toll booths. There's no, it's been engineered to allow that much more throughput. So that's the most non-technical answer I can give you. There's a lot of very specific, specialized things that the computer scientists can all jabberjaw at each other about. But in a basic sense, it's just plainly that there is enough space for the amount of demand for use. But it also scales elastically. So a lot of people will say that, well, as soon as you get to 10 times more volume than BTC, is it then going to have a similar problem? And the answer is no, because there is no hard cap block size limit, and there's no cap to how many operations can be run at a time. Like BTC has a lot of very tight and strict rules at the protocol level that don't allow you to even really cheat your way into scaling very well either. Whereas BSV has gotten rid of all of those things at the protocol level, and anything that a transaction processing entity, typically called a miner, would like to implement to make something better for their customers, which are us, the users, or online casinos, or whoever wants to use that network. They're allowed to try special purpose ways to scale or push interesting data across the network or whatever. So Bitcoin SV is a completely open protocol with no perceptible top in how much volume that it has. And across all testing, nobody's been able to find a place where it starts to jam up either. So even on the test networks and things where they're trying to break it, they tend to just keep saying, well, when we pushed the limit that we didn't know, the fees actually went down a little bit. So we're still looking for the limits on this thing, and a lot of really good good stuff coming, frankly. So it's a really good tool in that regard.
Excellent. I think what excites me the most about this is the ability to do microtransactions, which, as someone who comes from the gambling world, I can see all the different ways that we could use this. And Joseph, you were saying that to fully experience the benefits of blockchain, you need to have digital currency as well, cryptocurrency as well. And when you can do micropayments, I think that this opens up the door for just so many doors, especially with markets like Latin America, where you have a lot of customers that don't have hundreds of dollars to spend on a bet. They might have 5 cents or a cent. And then by using a protocol such as BSV, they can do that, whereas some of the other digital currencies, it's just not possible because of the fees. So, Kurt, can you tell us actually, like, how, when we say microtransaction, I mean, what amount of money are we talking about? What's possible?
So,
explain to us.
I mean, it's like saying, what is small? What is the meaning of small? So I'm a pretty big guy, so I know a lot of small people, but there's a number of definitions. I think when Satoshi Nakamoto put out the Bitcoin white paper in 2008, a microtransaction was anything under $1 or under $5 or something like that was the notion there. The white paper specifically says he wanted to disrupt internet commerce for small casual payments. So in 2008, if you were going to do internet business, you either had your basic credit card networks or debit card networks, and then you had PayPal. That covered most of the internet transactions in the world. So we're looking at fees in the ballpark of 3 to 5%, or on something like PayPal, you'd have fees at something like $3 to $5, depending on what you were buying. So that's what Bitcoin was designed to undercut. So in a very basic sense, that would be the small payment threshold, is anything under $5. However, in Bitcoin SV, we've seen fees are very typically at about 1/1000th of a penny today, which means that you can be doing business all day long in the realm of 1/100th of a penny, and be doing millions of transactions at that level. So in the last 6 months or so, we've been talking a lot about nano payments, which are things that are sub-cent or anything up to a penny. I would call a nano payment. Alex actually, his company is thriving in that space, so he may have some more specific definitions there too. But really, it's sort of that imperceptible commerce, or sort of the amount of business that you can be doing in under a penny, which is very applicable to lots of markets in Southeast Asia, big parts of Africa, big parts of South America, where their value, the value of their currency, is quite a bit lower than the dollar. So doing something in the 1 penny range is when weighed in American dollars, but there's actually a lot of business to do there. And I'm personally aware of some of that's happening in Vietnam and the Philippines and things, where they do quite a bit of business at that level. So it's good to have units that can be used at that level.
Wonderful. Yes, Alex, you are the next man to contribute here. Hand Cash, as Kurt said, is a leader in this space when it comes to nano payments, micropayments. And I also wanted you to describe in a bit more detail why your wallet is so user friendly, because we can't do all these micropayments unless we have a fantastic wallet to do it with. I know when I first opened a Bitcoin wallet, maybe it was the same for all of you, we had to write down this 12 phrase thing, and it terrified me. It still kind of does. And I think perhaps this is why digital currency hasn't really skyrocketed in the gambling space yet, because it's complicated, or was. Can you explain to us how you've made things simpler, and add any points you have onto the micropayment question that I asked?
Sure. First, about micropayments and nanopayments, the way we define it internally are that we realize that micropayments is a word that's used outside of Bitcoin already for quite a while, and people associate it to payments typically from $1 to $10, because that's typically there are very, very few payments that you can find in any web page or whatever that are under $10, because it doesn't make any sense. If you add the fees from Visa or PayPal or whatever, so it's just not feasible. So what we call nano payments are things that are on that threshold of $1, and those are and we want to keep repeating that nano payments word over and over and over again, and that's something that's unique to BSV, and because it's a territory where others cannot compete. So we are trying to actually create this blue ocean where we are leading the nano payments revolution, economy, whatever, And we think the only technology that actually fits the bill today is BSV. We have tried other things like Lightning Network, etc., but you cannot build things like a simple game like Haste, for example, with Lightning. It's just impossible. You cannot do it. And the other part of the question was?
Yes, Handcash is so much easier to use than a lot of the other wallets. Right. Yeah, explain to us how.
When we started Handcash, basically what we wanted is just to create a product that's, for normal people. I mean, we tried to implement Bitcoin in one of our startups in 2015, and it was impossible for us. I mean, we didn't understand it, and we were, engineers, and it was super complicated for us to actually understand it. So that's why we created for users. We created this very simple wallet where we have been solving in the background all those geeky things that you typically associate with cryptocurrencies in general, like the 12 words, like confirmations. Like we've been the first company to actually remove many of those things, and then we've seen the trend that it's even other chains have started copying some of the things that we've learned along the way, and so basically we are making it super normal for users, because when you, for example, create a Facebook account, you don't expect to have to store 12 words passwords inside of a piece of paper and you save it in a store. Nobody does those things. So we don't want people to learn new stuff. We want them to we want to create a product that they can already use with their current knowledge of how to use a banking app, PayPal, or any of these things. We want to make it normal. And also for developers, it was very important for us, because what developers had were like very, very raw Bitcoin libraries on GitHub or wherever, open source, with no support. You had to rely on them actually updating the library. You had to understand how to handle UTXOs. You had to basically build your own wallet, and that's super complicated. I mean, we've been almost 4 years now with Handcash, and we are still finding out ways of improving the wallet infrastructure and solving problems for the future. So imagine if you have to actually get a team of people to actually build that thing for every single app that you create. I mean, we would just have 2 or 3 apps. So what we did, we very simple SDK that's in plain English, and if you can code and you understand English, super easy to create any kind of app. I mean, payments are just pay Kurt $1, execute. That's it. It's super easy, and you're actually using Bitcoin. And we thought it was very important to solve the usability from both sides, from user side and also developer side. Nobody was thinking about making it easy for developers because they're super smart.
Very cool. Yeah, it really is easy to use, and I urge everyone here to open up a wallet and try it. It's super easy. And really quick, Alex, I just wanted to ask for you to describe the app ecosystem that you have, because you've mentioned Haste now and Pure Game. And what you've done, which I think is so cool, is someone that has a Handcash wallet can then very easily start playing games, casino games with Pure Game, for example, and not have to sign up and do all sorts of extra barriers to entry. So can you describe to our audience here how that app ecosystem works?
Sure. It's very simple. With this SDK, basically the developers add this, they can connect their third-party apps. I mean, their apps, they can connect them directly to Handcash. And we have kind of an app store, if you want to call it that way. We call it the Handcash App Gallery. And you have a selection of apps that you can just connect. And when you tap the connect button, it's like a one-click sign up for every app, just like you did with you can do with Google login or with Facebook login. It's very similar, but it's even better because it has access to your funds, to your wallet funds, and it's very cool because then all those apps have a common place where they can get funds from, and they can pay you too. So it's very cool to see that when you are connected to 10, 15 apps, wherever, you just wake up and you suddenly have like 30 or 40 new payments overnight. And you go to any of these apps and you don't have to think about, oh, I'm sending money from these, I have to deposit there and pay fees and wait for the approval or whatever. No, you have all the money in your account, and you're basically sharing access to that wallet at the same time that you're accessing these apps can access your identity. And that's something that you cannot do with any other chain, at least not the way we do it in BSV, because as you said, the fees are so low that you can actually use it in apps, because in other, with Ethereum, it's useless to actually even try.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, imagine a world of all the online casinos just in that app ecosystem. It would be so easy for the player. Okay, so I wanted to just switch gears a bit to regulation. Joseph, I know that you have lots of expertise in this area, especially because of your experience with Malta. But in Latin America, there's a lot of gray areas. There's regulators really trying to figure out how to regulate both land-based and online, and it's a bit all over the place in Latin America at the moment. So Joseph, if you had time to sit down with some of these regulators and explain to them the benefits of blockchain tech and how it can help them do their job, what would you say to these guys?
First of all, the trick of regulation is always in finding the balance. So unless you find the balance, your regulatory framework will not be attractive. And this is a very crucial point that all regulators need to understand. And unfortunately, in many cases, it's not just about regulators, because most of the times the regulators do understand this. The problem is that they don't have any say in the legislation. So, for example, in Malta, any legislation that comes out on gaming has to be done in consultation with the regulator, because the regulator is the expert in the field. So, unfortunately, that is not the case in many countries. Yes, and automatically, once you have a regulator that is future-looking, that tries to understand new business models, new technologies, you will have situations where the regulator can propose new ideas to the legislator. And I believe that, I always say that blockchain can benefit the three parties in a gaming transaction, let's call it that way. So it benefits the player, it benefits the operator, but it can also benefit the regulator. Why? So earlier I mentioned transparency and audit rates. That is a massive advantage also for a regulator. If we had to really implement blockchain and cryptocurrencies properly and totally, we could have a situation where the regulator or whichever regulatory authority deals with that, could actually collect the tax automatically through the smart contract. So we could have a situation whereby you'll have a player making a wager, winning or losing the wager, and in that precise moment, when the player receives the winnings or the operator receives the wager that was lost by the player, automatically the fraction that should be paid in tax, or it's not so much of a fraction in most cases, unfortunately, we're talking of quite a healthy percentage, goes automatically, directly, immediately to the regulatory authority that collects taxes. Because again, in Malta, for example, it's the gaming authority that collects gaming taxes. In some other jurisdictions, you'd have to pay your taxes with a completely different entity. But imagine that. The regulator doesn't need to chase. The tax will be paid automatically in that specific instant when the wager happens, or the game is determined, let's call it that way. So there could be massive advantages from that point of view. And as I said, the most important one is definitely transparency. So the regulator doesn't need to rely on third parties to make sure that the games are fair, but rather the games are fair because they can actually audit them and see exactly what was paid out, what came in, what came out, and what percentage was really held by the operator.
And I think another area too is with responsible gambling. There's so many things that you could do with responsible gambling and having transparency that the regulator can literally look on chain and see if the operator is taking steps to deal with these issues. So it's just so sorry. Go ahead, Joseph.
So I was going to add as well, because obviously we're mentioning the general stuff here, but blockchain could be very useful with player protection. So in terms of responsible gaming, you can assess better whether the operators are actually adhering to responsible gaming requirements. And even self-exclusion, for example, could be much more easily implemented if we had the blockchain that is allowed to help us, literally. Because that is the situation. We just need the blockchain to help us, the blockchain technology to help us to achieve better results.
Very good. Very good. And Kurt, I wanted to ask your opinion on something, because I know on your live stream you mentioned that sometimes, while regulation is very important and rules and all of this to keep people safe, all very important, it can also be a damper on innovation. And if all of us that have all these really cool ideas that can be thriving using blockchain and Bitcoin, and we sit and wait for all the rules to be laid out there, it's going to be, 2050. So I was wondering if you could provide us some examples of how there have been some innovators and entrepreneurs out there who have created something in maybe a gray area, and then it had success with that idea, and then it fits into the regulations down the line. If you could talk on that a bit.
Sure. It's funny, the history of really the internet is exactly that. I mean, going to before Bitcoin by quite a bit. I think a lot of people didn't know how the internet would disrupt all kinds of business models 20 years ago. And some people did. This is why we had the dot-com boom and then ultimately the dot-com burst. But there were a lot of lessons learned there about, if you can connect people, more readily, and you can remove business friction, then all of a sudden new business models are created that you may not understand or that we may not have been able to predict otherwise. And as a rule, regulators are very slow. They don't think proactively, into the future in the same way that an entrepreneur would. But truly, they know that that's their role, and they expect for progressive entrepreneurs to come to them with some of these good ideas. But I think also one thing that I've come to realize over about 8 years in the Bitcoin space is that regulators are also not as scary as I think a lot of the blockchain people expect them to be. I think a lot of people expected, like, okay, we need to just have pure anonymity and do our dark business and create some kind of exit, or else we're all going to end up in prison and they're the bad guys, and we're going to maybe we'll bring down the governments entirely with our innovations. And I think it's funny to see how many people just simply got some basic slaps on the wrist about some things, maybe had to pay some fines, but ultimately the business models and even the businesses themselves, in some cases, some of these violating businesses have been allowed to just proceed with their business model after just figuring out ways to add in things like KYC and AML laws, for example. And we've seen a little bit of this even in like the simple DeFi space with some of these investment schemes that almost kind of look like a Ponzi scheme at a glance. But then you see like, oh, okay, well, they have a New York business banking license, or they have, some of these other things. And like, okay, maybe we disagree with, some of the decisions that they've made, or, maybe they started as kind of a gray market business to begin with. But ultimately, if they're providing value to their customers and their customers are making money for a long period of time, I think we've actually seen, even in New York, that has had some of the most stringent laws about these things, has actually been really open-minded. Even with someone like Tether, I think is probably the best example of a business that in my opinion, still looks very, very scammy. They look like they've built a big paper paper empire here that isn't backed by much. But the New York Attorney General's office, I mean, they gave a fine and a kind of a slap on the wrist and gave guidance on some things. And Tether looks like they're complying. And I think it's totally possible that amid all of it, Tether could come out unscathed, actually. If their business model continues to provide value to the crypto economy and all of these different things. And of course, it could go the other direction too. I mean, you never know when the FBI is going to, kick the doors in. But what we have seen is that they've towed the line. They've pushed back where they felt appropriate, and ultimately, regulators they don't want to go down in history as the ones that allowed a big economic boom to happen in another country, for example, because they were too stringent. And I think there's an obvious use here where regulators sort of understand that, like, hey, if we're too tough, we're going to end up letting China or somebody else innovate past us, and then over a generation, our regulatory agency could be looked at as the agency that made it impossible for our country to succeed long term in this new economic paradigm. So I'm a big believer in turning gray markets white. Just make sure that when you create a business model that you're actually providing value to your customers. And if it's unclear, if the law just simply doesn't exist yet on your business model, there's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs to show regulators and show governments that, hey, here's a giant opportunity to create new business. And if you allow us to continue to do these things, like, sure, we'll pay a licensing fee in the future when you figure out what our business model actually is. But for the time being, we're going to provide value to our customers, and we're going to show people that the businesses can be this much more efficient using our new technology. And I actually think the gambling space has a lot of examples too. Internet gambling 20 years ago had a lot of this kind of thing too, where guys are setting up businesses in island nations, and some of this is like, ooh, I don't know. I don't know who's allowed to wire what money to which jurisdictions, and some people we know got some slaps on the wrists too, and paid some fines. But ultimately, these people are the consultants to the regulatory bodies today, and I think that that's a crucial lesson to learn in the blockchain space as well.
Very good. Thank you. And we've got about 15 minutes left, and I wanted to just touch on a couple of areas that are very popular at the moment, and also maybe clear up some misconceptions that are happening at the moment. So the popular areas, I almost have to laugh saying it because it's ridiculous, is the NFTs, where everyone's talking about NFTs and tokens. And what they actually are, and how the gambling industry could potentially use such tech. But Alex, let's hear from you on this one. What are your thoughts on NFT tokens, potential applications for the gambling world? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot of money to be made right now in the market. There's a lot of craze. Every time you get a new buzzword, there's a lot of, like 99% of things that appear in the market are just to make a quick buck. But then you see those 1% of examples of things that actually make sense and solve actual problems. And I think NFTs is one of those use cases. One, you have a digital ownership. The problem is that you have digital ownership of a JPEG image, or of a tweet, things that can be easily replicable or whatever. That in my opinion, they don't provide any value at all. I think it's just people are making a lot of money out of that hype and using that buzzword, but actually you're buying a JPEG that could be replicated easily. But another thing is that you have, for example, imagine if you had a Nintendo, if they had a Pokemon game where every single creature that you can capture is digitally created and tagged by Nintendo, and every time that you are using them on the game, they can check for authenticity of that particular item or Pokemon or whatever. I think that's very valuable for them, because right now they're having a lot of real issues of people hacking these creatures. So instead of going to the tough road or tough path to actually have great assets for competition. They just make it up on the computer, and that's something that Nintendo really doesn't like, because then it's very hard to actually do promotions or things that make sense, because you don't have real scarcity there. So that's one thing that with blockchain technology you can control: scarcity and authenticity. Then you can create great campaigns to actually create unique content, and that's one of the things that I'm more interested in with NFTs. But I think other than that, most of it is just smoke.
Very good. And Joseph, one of the reasons why I was laughing when I said NFTs is it reminds me of ICOs, back when this was this. I know at WH Partners you were talking with a lot of clients about this. So what are you talking with your clients about now when it comes to NFTs and tokens? Anything in particular?
Well, in truth, NFTs are a different animal, let's call it that way, from the traditional cryptocurrencies that were being launched in 2017-18. So, in truth, an NFT is a real digital asset as it's meant to be, right? So, when we speak of digital assets, an NFT embodies what one would understand when you hear the term. While with cryptocurrencies, the asset part is not always very clear where it falls. So in many cases, in fact, it's a digital currency more than an asset. But an NFT is a pure digital asset, and you might have assets which are backed by nothing, but in some cases you have NFTs that are backed by something much more tangible and much more valuable. So ultimately, I believe that we cannot compare this craze about NFTs with the ICO craze there was in 2016, 17, 18. Although we're going to see a lot of these NFTs that are really worth nothing and they are really useless. But I'm pretty sure that with NFTs, we're going to also have situations where we're going to have they offer the possibility, a better possibility of tokenization of objects, in my opinion. So if we're looking at the tokenization of arts, tokenization of real estate, I would say that NFTs are better suited, probably, than the traditional cryptocurrencies. On the other hand, in gaming, because we have to tie this to gaming as well, NFTs could be an easy way of representing prizes, maybe in gaming, and they could. So, for example, I don't know if you all remember, there was a craze at one point in time in the industry about these reverse auctions, where you actually bid and the lowest bid will win rather than the highest bid will win, the lowest unique bid. And I believe that NFTs could have a very interesting role in that kind of gambling, let's call it gambling, and in other forms of gambling, of course. And possibly, I would say that NFTs could be quite interesting. They could be used in a few interesting ways in esports. So, like we have certain games that involve, so fantasy sports, for example, in relation to traditional football players and traditional basketball players and so on. Obviously, with NFTs, we could have something more modern and more appealing to the younger generations for esports. And that could be also very interesting to look into.
Very good. Very good. And Kurt, what would you have to say about NFTs and gambling industry?
I mean, there's so many opportunities. I think Joseph is absolutely right. Talking about prizes is an obvious one. But imagine an exceptional player that won various trophies or won various important tournaments, and those different tournament prizes were issued as NFTs. He could then sell portions of it or whatever. He can leverage some of those things digitally and allow them to be traded. But I'm even picturing the players themselves. So one of the cool things about an NFT is that you can create a non-fungible token of yourself. And if you are a valuable asset or a potentially valuable asset yourself as a player, I'm thinking sort of the up-and-coming player. If he were to tokenize himself, he could then sell futures to his own performance and allow people to speculate on whether they think he will be a champion in 5 years. And there are some opportunities there to monetize startup careers and these sorts of things, especially in the esports zone. A lot of these players are world champion Fortnite players, and they're 14 and 15 years old. And if they don't have parents that can bootstrap their career, then they just don't get the opportunity to play. But NFTs could create an opportunity there too, where they can say, hey, you know what, I'm a top 100 player in this game. I'm not exactly famous yet, but if you're willing to buy futures against my tokenized future performance, then that allows me to travel to increasingly valuable tournaments and that kind of thing. And then 3 years from now, maybe this player's a top 10 player, and the tokens that people bought to fund his startup are now worth quite a bit more. So you create an investment opportunity where you can treat each person as an asset. And I think in the professional sports business, this is how sports agents have thought for 100 years now. They're constantly they're scouting colleges and even high schools and looking for these great players that are coming up. But it's been a very, very closed economy among those people. And what this does is it puts the power in the hands of the athlete, or if you can call an esports player an athlete, but it puts the power in their hand, and then that can be transplanted out into other business models too, where there's a very small group of agents and teams that handle this kind of thing, and you can really democratize the power of the celebrity athlete or the up and coming athlete to bootstrap their own career and not have to sign punitive contracts. And some of these people only have a 2 or a 3 year career before they're forced to retire for various reasons. And maybe they never negotiated a contract that allowed them to retire, even though they were a very special player at a certain kind of game. So it can allow people to create dividends that last for a long time, and even portions of these things looking back from like a legendary standpoint. I mean, imagine being able to do something like this with Michael Jordan in 1985, and now you can own a digital representation of him in 2021. I mean, it's like having a Michael Jordan rookie card now, and you were able to buy it for $5 in the 80s, and now you can trade it for a house. So I think we can see these kind of business models that will creep up over the next year or so, and then a decade from now, there will be those visionary people who bought essentially stock in some of these up and coming ideas, and people today that are able to basically retire on them in the near future. So there's a lot of opportunities with NFT that are to be explored.
Oh, I love it. It's so exciting. And and Alex, I'm gonna hit you with this question. We have exactly, 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Okay, so in the title of this panel, we have the phrase AI, artificial intelligence, which we haven't talked about at all. But I often find that a lot of people tend to couple blockchain and AI, and I know you have experience in AI. Just really quickly, how much of a crossover is there? And I mean, do you think that these are two completely separate subjects, or should they be grouped together in sessions like this?
I think there are two different subjects, but I think one can improve the other in ways that we've never seen before. The AI is very data intensive. So the problem is that you cannot buy, if you're a young startup, you cannot just go to BMW and say, hey, just sell me $20,000 worth of driving data or whatever so for my autonomous driving project. You cannot do that. You have to build your own car. You have to, drive a lot of miles and millions of kilometers to actually get some valuable data. So one thing is that imagine that BMW or Fiat or whatever, they can monetize their cars in another way, that you're buying a cheaper car because you're selling your driving data to all these companies live, and you can do that with very low bandwidth data that you're sending all the time through the and it's been stored or at least recorded in the blockchain for authenticity purposes, and you get paid, live for every mile that you run with your car. And there are startups that can actually pay for fractions of that data to actually get started and improve on on create new algorithms for automate things with AI. So I think blockchain can dramatically improve what you can do with AI, especially for young startups. I think it can democratize data in that sense, or at least so people say that data is the new oil. The problem is that it's only in a few hands. So I think blockchain can help democratize AI.
Amazing. Amazing. Guys, honestly, the love I have for all of you is tangible. This is great. And I could go on for hours, and I know all three of you could too. I want to thank all of you so much for sharing your expertise. I want to thank the CGS for the opportunity to allow us to educate the audience on this incredible area of technology and innovation. Thank you guys so much. And have a great show, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.